I woke up to silence. That had not been what I had fallen asleep to. My father and Edward had still been fighting when I returned, and they continued until I finally drifted off to sleep. I knew that I should do something, but what was I supposed to say? I loved my father and my brother, but I always had mixed feelings about coming home. Brom would be up soon. He always rose early to shake him and Edward out of bed. I, however, was interested in finding out what that report Duke Charles had gotten was. It must have been urgent for the courtier to have interrupted the Duke while dining with the king. So I stole out before either Edward or Brom woke up and headed towards the palace. Dunmore always felt different when everyone was asleep. I had spent much time out during this time, getting into whatever half-baked schemes I could come up with. Edward had never been interested in his antics, so I had found an unlikely accomplice in Christina. I was admitted into the gates of the palace and found Charles and Arthur conversing. "What do they mean by creatures?" Arthur asked. "Unfortunately, they don't elaborate much further than that," Charles explained. "They resemble woodland creatures but give off an aura. Sounds like magical constructs." I interjected. Validur, I was hoping you'd come by." Charles said, pleased. "This seems to be something that requires your expertise. How can I be of assistance?" I asked. "Those creatures that I spoke of have been sighted in the wood west of here," Charles explained. "They haven't attacked anyone, but they have caused a stir in the area. Creating constructs such as those aren't simple spells," I stated. "It takes a mage of considerable skill." "Do you think this is more of Morgan's work?" Arthur asked. "It's a lead," I replied. "If it is the witch, it would be wise to involve Merlin," Charles offered. "But Camelot is weeks from here. That's too long to wait," Arthur lamented. "We don't have to," I replied. "Follow me." I led them into Merlin's old laboratory. Cluttered wasn't a strong enough word to describe the place for someone as meticulous as Merlin. Cleanliness wasn't his strong suit. I dusted off a glowing apparatus. "What is that?" Arthur asked curiously. Merlin wanted a way to travel quickly between here and Camelot once it was built. I said, "This is a way to travel to and communicate with his laboratory in Camelot." I hovered my hand over a rune, and the apparatus hummed to life. "So I take it that it's magically keyed to certain individuals?" Charles guessed. "Only 3 people in England can activate it," I replied. "You, Merlin, and..." Arthur inquired. "You," I said simply. "Really?" Arthur asked, surprised. "If you were ever in trouble, this was to be a means of escape," I explained. "And when was he going to tell me about this?" "When you returned to Camelot." "Well, that makes sense." An image of Merlin soon materialized into the room. Both Arthur and Charles jumped in surprise. I did my best to stifle my laughter. "I see that you two made it to Dunmore with little trouble," Merlin deduced. "I wouldn't say little trouble," Arthur muttered. "Charles, good to see you again, old friend," Merlin greeted. "Always a pleasure, Merlin," Charles responded warmly. "So what do I owe the pleasure?" Merlin asked. It was Arthur who spoke up. "Merlin, Duke Charles' men have discovered strange creatures that we believe Morgan may have created." Merlin's face immediately lost its good humor. He shot a look at me and I nodded. Merlin folded his arms and said nothing for a moment. "I have a pressing matter that I must attend to," Merlin disclosed, "but I will be here first thing tomorrow. Do not make a move against her until I arrive." "Validur," I huffed. I wasn't surprised that I had been singled out. Merlin knew that I'd want to go after her immediately. Patience wasn't my strong suit. "I'll have some men keep an eye on the situation until then," Charles stated. "By your leave, your majesty." Arthur nodded, and Charles made his exit. "You don't grimace when people call you that anymore," Merlin said. "Not outwardly, at least," Arthur replied. "It's a start," Merlin conceded. "By the way, I mean it, Validur. Stay put." "Very well," I said, frowning. Merlin didn't seem completely convinced, but accepted it. Perhaps things would have ended differently had I heeded him.